The First Pacific Bank on Wilshire Boulevard was unusually crowded that late afternoon. People filled the lobby from the service counters all the way to the glass doors. There was a dull, steady hum of complaint in the air. The scratch of pens, the buzz of fluorescent lights, the soft but constant tapping of impatient feet. A child cried somewhere near the back. An older man muttered under his breath about the city. A woman in a business suit checked her watch every 30 seconds. The staff moved quickly behind the counters, trying to keep the lines moving. Phones rang, receipts printed, and the floor felt small under the weight of so many people waiting for their turn. Behind one of the counters sat a young teller, Brittany Wallace. She had dark circles under her eyes and wore her hair in a tight ponytail. Her movements were sharp and efficient, the kind you see in someone who has learned to survive long shifts and endless customer complaints. Her expression suggested she had decided, long ago, which customers deserved help and which ones did not. When she saw the small, frail woman approach the counter carrying an envelope, she made a split-second decision without even thinking about it. This would be a slow, minor inconvenience, nothing to waste energy on. The woman was Linda Carter. At 73, she moved with the careful, deliberate pace of someone who respects routines and lives by them. Her silver hair was neatly styled, her coat was modest but clean. She held a yellowed envelope in her hands the way someone holds something precious and fragile. Inside were bank statements and old receipts she had kept. For a retired school teacher living on a fixed pension, every dollar mattered. Recently, she had noticed small, recurring fees on her account, fees she did not remember agreeing to, and fees that made a meaningful dent in her monthly budget. She had spent an anxious week trying to make sense of the charges. Sitting at her kitchen table with the lamp on and the television low, she had gone through every paper until the numbers and dates matched her handwriting. Her heart rate had quickened when she saw a pattern. The charges began 2 months ago, small at first and then slightly larger. They were not huge amounts, but they were not supposed to be there. She approached the counter with a calm voice and a simple request. "Good afternoon," she said. "I think there is a mistake on my account. I'm seeing fees that I don't understand." Brittany did not look up from her keyboard. "Those are standard account maintenance fees, ma'am," she replied without any warmth. Linda extended her envelope and pushed the papers forward. "But I've had this account for years," she said softly. "I've never seen these charges before." Brittany finally glanced at the papers and let out a dramatic sigh that seemed intended to be heard by everyone in line. She flipped through the documents carelessly, eyes moving fast as if she had already made up her mind. "It's in the fine print," she said. "If you didn't read it, that's not our fault." A few people in line chuckled under their breath. A young man shifted his weight and smirked. Linda felt her face grow warm with embarrassment. Her throat tightened. She had spent decades in classrooms teaching respect and patience. It was disorienting to suddenly feel so small and dismissed over something she had not done wrong. She tried to keep her voice steady. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I just want someone to look at my account and explain these charges." Brittany smirked and folded her arms. "If you want to avoid fees, you need to keep more money in your account. That's how banks work." The line quieted for a moment. Then a few murmurs and small laughs drifted like an ugly breeze through the room. Linda's eyes sought a friendly face. No one looked at her. Strangers turned away to their phones. People who had earlier loudly complained about long wait times suddenly acted as if nothing important was happening in front of them. The public humiliation tightened like a band around Linda's chest. At that moment, a man approached, Carl Jensen, the branch manager. He had a tidy haircut, a pressed suit, and a confident posture that suggested he had practiced how to appear busy and in charge. He looked over briefly, measured the small scene, and decided the problem was not worth his time. Then curiosity, or perhaps a desire to maintain control, made him walk forward a few steps. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, the words flat but loud enough so everyone could hear. His smile was polite but posed, a professional mask that never quite reached his eyes. Brittany straightened immediately. "Just a customer who doesn't understand our policies," she said. Carl turned to Linda with the sort of patience that feels rehearsed. Ma'am, we have standard fees in place. If you can't meet the minimum balance, we can't remove automated charges. Linda drew in a breath, trying to steady herself. I've always kept my account in good standing. These fees started 2 months ago. I'm only asking that someone review them. Carl let out a short, amused laugh and leaned a little closer to make sure his voice carried. What's in the system is in the system, ma'am. We don't review automated charges. If you can't afford the fees, maybe this bank isn't the right place for you. The sentence landed like a blow. The bank fell quieter than before. A few people glanced at each other with guarded expressions. Linda felt like she had been reduced to a problem to be fixed or discarded. She gripped the edge of the counter to stop her hands from trembling. Pride and fatigue met somewhere inside her and made her want to turn away, to retreat into less complicated days. She had taught children for decades about fairness and courage, but the lesson is harder when you are the one who needs it. Then a voice cut through the room like a clean blade. It was deep and steady, and it carried the kind of calm confidence that makes people stop mid-breath. Why are you talking to her like that? Every head in the bank turned toward the entrance. A man stood there at the doorway. At first glance, he looked like any ordinary customer. Black t-shirt, jeans, a baseball cap. But there was presence in the way he held himself. Quiet but undeniable. He walked in, removed his cap with a slow, deliberate motion, and the room reacted the way rooms do when they recognize someone famous. A ripple of gasps, 100 tiny phone cameras lifting. It was Vin Diesel. For a moment, the theater of a Hollywood star in a bank made people breathe as if the air had suddenly changed. Carl's posture shifted. Brittany's smile vanished. Linda's eyes widened in disbelief. The man who had been quietly suffering felt a strange mix of embarrassment and relief, like the sun touching a frost patch. Then crossed the lobby, not with swagger, but with a clear, purposeful stride. He stopped a few feet from Carl and looked at him with an even, measured gaze. "It doesn't matter who I am," he said, speaking softly but steadily. "What matters is why you're treating this woman this way." Carl, startled and flattened by the attention, stumbled over an answer. "Sir, this is none of your business," he said. "These are standard procedures. She doesn't meet the requirements for a certain account tier." Then tilted his head slightly and let the words hang. Policies or an excuse to humiliate someone who's asking for fairness? He turned and spoke toward the room so everyone could hear. It was not an angry outburst. It was a quiet demand for respect. Brittany shifted her weight, suddenly aware of how small and mean her earlier behavior looked. Some customers murmured agreement. Others looked down at their shoes, two kinds of guilt in their faces. The kind that comes from watching injustice and smiling, and the kind that comes from realizing they could have intervened and did not. Then walked up to Linda and asked, "Ma'am, may I see what's going on?" She hesitated, nervous at the attention, then carefully handed him the envelope. He took it with the kind of care you use for someone else's delicate thing, and he read through the statements, eyes moving slow and precise. The bank seemed to shrink to that small space around them, a tiny island where the truth could finally be examined. After a few minutes, Vin looked up, his expression calm but firm. "These charges shouldn't be here," he said. "They started 2 months ago. You need to fix this." Carl swallowed. "Sir, there are policies." Then raised a hand slightly. "If it's a mistake, fix it. If it's not a mistake, then you're knowingly harming customers who trust your bank, and that's going to be a big problem for you." Suddenly, Carl realized the room had shifted. Customers who had been focused on their own irritation were watching closely. The woman with the baby was recording on her phone now. The young man in line who earlier had laughed had his own device up, his thumb already poised to share. The bank's lobby transformed into an audience with a moral lens. Brittany, under the pressure, pulled up Linda's account on the monitor. She typed with shaky fingers. The screen showed a pattern. Years of modest, routine transactions. Then, 2 months ago, a change. Automated maintenance fees appearing regularly. The numbers were not dramatic individually, but together they added up to a meaningful loss for someone on a fixed pension. Vin turned to the customers in the bank and asked plainly, "How many of you have seen unexpected fees in your accounts in the past 2 months?" At first, the answers were hesitant. Then one raised their hand, then another. A few people exchanged looks, surprised that others had been affected. A construction worker admitted he had seen similar charges. An elderly couple nodded. The murmurs grew into a low chorus of recognition. The problem was wider than Linda alone. It had been quietly hitting people who were less likely to notice or complain. Seniors, busy parents, people juggling work and bills. Vin's voice was steady. "So this isn't only her problem. This looks like a systemic issue. Why are you applying these charges to people who rely on this bank for basic services?" Carl's mouth opened and closed. "We follow corporate guidelines," he said, a phrase which sounded suddenly thin and hollow when faced with the faces of real people around him. Vin moved closer to the counter, his presence folding the nervous air into something that felt like accountability. "Then prove it. Show us where these charges came from. If it's an error, correct it now. And if it's not an error, then you need to explain to these people why you think it's acceptable to take from them without clear notice." Brittany scrolled through the account details, eyes flicking to the screen and then to Carl. The cursor blinked like a small, impatient heartbeat. She found the policy notes and saw the change that had been pushed system-wide. It had been set as an automatic adjustment, one of those corporate-level updates that rarely get reviewed at the branch level. Her lips trembled. She could feel the weight of being the messenger for a decision she had not made. Vin spoke again, calmly but with an edge that tightened the room. "Reverse the charges for anyone affected. Apologize, and commit to reviewing your practices so that this does not happen again." There was a hush. Carl stared at the screen like it had become an enemy. The thought of admitting a mistake, of owning a process that had hurt clients, of telling corporate on himself, made his face pale. But the cameras were there, phones held steady, and the bank's quiet atmosphere had turned into public scrutiny. The moment felt like one of those moral tests you read about, where courage or cowardice is suddenly visible to everyone. Carl looked at Brittany. "Do it," he said in a low voice, a command layered with panic. Brittany's fingers moved quickly over the keyboard. She reversed the charges for Linda first, then for several other accounts flagged by the notes in the system. The software rolled back transaction by transaction. The numbers on the screen blinked as if relieved. Around the bank, people leaned forward, incredulous and grateful. The mother with the baby let out a small laugh that sounded like a release of held breath. The young man who had earlier smirked looked down at his phone, then up at Brittany with a new respect. Then turned to Carl, who was losing ground fast. "Now apologize," he said simply. Carl's voice came out stiff. "Mrs. Carter, on behalf of the bank, I apologize for how you were treated and for these charges. That was wrong." Linda's shoulders relaxed fractionally. She nodded, eyes glassy, smiling faintly like someone who had just regained an old dignity. Brittany, who had been defensive moments ago, now found her expression shifting toward remorse. Phones in the bank chimed. Someone in the line had already uploaded the video. The footage showed the exact exchange, the way the teller had treated the elderly woman, the manager's indifferent performance, and Vin Diesel's calm confrontation. The clip spread like a spark in dry grass. Within the hour, people who had not been in the bank were watching the scene unfold online. Comments flooded in, outrage, support for Linda, praise for Vin, demands for accountability. Corporate headquarters reacted quickly. Within a day, the bank's internal affairs team contacted the branch. They opened an investigation into the fee changes and the branch's customer service. The story moved from a local complaint to a national conversation about how banks treat vulnerable customers. News segments ran the footage, local anchors interviewed Linda and a few other affected customers, and social media amplified the outrage. As the investigation unfolded, the bank announced it would refund the affected customers and review its policies. Carl Jensen was placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the probe. Brittany, who had been following orders and also felt pressure from Carl, cooperated fully with the inquiry. She explained in interviews that she had been told the changes were corporate mandated and that she had not been trained to handle the fallout. In the weeks that followed, Linda watched the response from her small kitchen. She sat at her usual place, a cup of tea cooling beside her, and read the messages of support from strangers across the country. People sent cards, letters, and offers to help with errands. Her phone rang with interview requests, something she had never expected in her life. She accepted a short local interview because she wanted to make sure others like her would know they did not have to accept disrespect. When the bank finalized its investigation, they announced that all improperly applied fees would be refunded. The company issued a public apology, citing a failure to communicate a policy change clearly to vulnerable customers. Carl was let go for his behavior and for failing to take corrective action earlier. Brittany was allowed to keep her job, but she was transferred to another branch and required to undergo customer relations training. The bank also committed to a more sensitive policy on how fee changes are implemented and explained. A few days after the public apology, an unexpected envelope arrived for Linda. Inside was a handwritten note on simple stationery. It read, "Mrs. Carter, you didn't need me to stand up for you. You already had the strength. You just needed someone to remind you. Hope this makes you smile. Vin." Along with the note was a signed poster and an invitation to a movie premiere. Linda sat at her kitchen table with the envelope in her hands and felt a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. She thought about the days she had spent teaching children how to treat children with respect and dignity. She smiled, not because of the fame or the gifts, but because someone had seen her and chosen to say something that mattered. The video and the resulting changes did more than just reverse fees. It started conversations. Community centers organized workshops to help elderly people understand their finances. Volunteers offered to help older neighbors set up alerts and read statements. A local nonprofit partnered with the bank to provide clearer notice of any policy changes affecting seniors. The ripple from one afternoon in a crowded bank helped create practical changes that reached beyond the lobby on Wilshire Boulevard. People who were in that bank that day remembered the way the light from the windows fell on Linda's hair, the small catch in her voice when she tried to explain, the way the manager had failed to look her in the eye until forced to. They remembered the hush that filled the room when a famous actor walked in, and how quickly a single voice can change a crowded room. They remembered the relief that spread through them as the charges were reversed and the apology was given. And later, they would tell the story to friends and family to remind they themselves to notice and to act. Months later, at the premiere Vin had invited her to, Linda sat quietly in the back row. Cameras flashed, people laughed, and the theater hummed with excitement. She did not relish the spotlight the way celebrities do, but she felt comfortable and dignified. She wore a simple dress, her hair neat. The world had turned for her in a way she had not expected. She felt seen and respected. The memory of that afternoon in the bank stayed with her, not as a wound, but as a turning point. She understood that sometimes standing up or allowing someone to stand up for you changes more than just one account balance. It can change how a community treats its elders, how strangers respond in a crowded room, and how the quiet dignity of a life can be honored in public. The story of Linda Carter and the day Vin Diesel walked into a bank spread beyond the headlines. It became a small, local legend about decency and accountability. People used it as an example when teaching their kids about fairness. Banks reviewed their customer policies more carefully. Individuals learned that watching in silence is a choice, that choosing to speak up can make a difference. And across the city, for a long time after, people who passed a stumble of age on a sidewalk sometimes offered a hand without being asked. In the end, Linda returned to her regular routines, but with a new lightness. She walked with a little more confidence to her mailbox. She checked her account online and felt safe in numbers that made sense. On quiet afternoons, she would look at the signed poster on her wall and smile. It was a reminder that dignity matters, that good people can notice and step in, and that a single, calm voice can turn a tide.